Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something that really gets to the heart of military readiness, especially for U.S. forces in Europe and Africa. We're talking about USARAF.
Right, and their whole mission of deterrence, especially along NATO's eastern flank, that context is so important.
It is, because when you hear military modernization, your mind immediately goes to hardware, right? New tanks, new drones, fancier gear.
Absolutely. The whole conversation defaults to acquisitions. It's this very top-down, tech-heavy way of thinking about the problem. We just need to buy the next best thing.
Exactly. But what if that's not just incomplete? What if it's fundamentally the wrong way to look at it? What if the real key, the thing that actually makes a force lethal, isn't the new gear itself, but a radical shift in culture, in training?
And in trust, specifically trusting your most junior leaders.
That's the core question we're getting into today. Because the sources we're looking at suggest that if you just keep buying expensive tech without fixing the culture, all you're doing is creating a very well-equipped but internally paralyzed force.
A fragile force.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack a different methodology, one that argues for a complete flip of the model, from top-down acquisitions to a bottom-up, soldier-led evolution.
And it's all centered on empowering the non-commissioned officer, the NCO, your sergeants, your staff sergeants. They have to become the engine of modernization.
Not just the people who get handed the new equipment with a manual.
Exactly. They have to be the ones driving it. And the core of this whole argument, it comes from a really powerful white paper. It's called Reclaiming the Backbone, a methodology for NCO-driven modernization and asymmetric training. It's by M.A.J. Andrew Pingray.
And we're also pulling from a related document, an example memorandum he wrote, which gets into the nitty-gritty of how you actually change the command philosophy around WISC. That part's critical.
Oh, it's maybe the most important part, because the big idea here is pretty straightforward. The goal isn't just to get the drones or the new comms gear. It's to empower the NCO to use that gear aggressively, to actually train with it, to experiment with it, even to break it. And it's about taking the digital instincts of this new generation of recruits.
The kids who grew up gaming.
The kids who grew up gaming, and turning that into real physical lethality on the battlefield. The paper argues that if we fail at that conversion process, the entire deterrence mission on the eastern flank is basically just a bluff.
Okay, so to really understand the solution, we have to start with the problem. Let's dig into this idea of the erosion of NCO authority.
Yeah, this really is a deep dive into the culture. For generations, the NCO has been called the backbone of the Army.
You see that on bumper stickers.
You do, but it's not just a slogan. It's supposed to be a functional description of their role. The NCO is meant to be the permanent institution within a unit. You know, officers come and go, but the NCO Corps provides the continuity, the hands-on expertise.
And the source talks about a very specific role within that, the platoon sergeant as the platoon daddy. That's a very specific and affectionate term. What does it imply?
It implies a deep, almost parental sense of ownership. That platoon sergeant owns the training, the discipline, the welfare of every soldier in that platoon. It's a relationship built on earned trust. The soldiers trust that platoon daddy because he's proven over and over that he knows how to keep them alive and make them effective.
But the whole argument here is that this role, this deep functional authority, has been worn down. It's been eroded over the last, 20 years?
At least. And the paper calls this the vulnerability of simplification. It's this slow, creeping change driven by a desire for centralization and, frankly, officer-led micromanagement.
So the system starts to undermine the NCO's actual domain.
It does. Let's make that concrete. Imagine you're a squad leader, a sergeant. You've got 12 soldiers. You know their individual strengths, their weaknesses. You know that Private Smith is a terrible shot under pressure and that Specialist Jones struggles with the new radio system.
So you should be designing training to fix those specific problems.
You should be. That's your job. But under this simplified, centralized model, you're not allowed to. Instead, the company commander or the battalion training officer hands you a mandatory PowerPoint slide deck and a pre-approved training schedule.
And you have to follow it to the letter.
To the letter, because the system isn't optimizing for your squad's lethality. It's optimizing for compliance. It wants a perfect, auditable paper trail so that when the brigade commander asks, "Did you do your mandatory cyber awareness training this quarter?" the answer is a clean, simple yes.
The goal becomes checking the box. It's not about actually getting better at fighting.
Precisely. The focus shifts upward. It becomes about, and this is a quote from the paper, showing the general something shiny.
Something shiny meaning perfect paperwork, a flawless inspection, a well-rehearsed demonstration.
Exactly. It's about looking good on paper, not about the messy, difficult day-to-day work of building a cohesive team. And that is where the NCO's authority just bleeds away. They stop being the masters of their craft and they start becoming the executors of someone else's checklist.
Which leads right into what the source calls the administrative trap. Because if the officers are busy with a million other things, managing acquisitions, high-level reporting, prepping for those shiny inspections, the NCO's job has to change to fill the gap.
It does. They stop being dynamic warfighters. They stop being creative trainers. They become, and this is another term from the paper, administrative babysitters.
Babysitters. That's a harsh term.
It is, but it's meant to be. The NCO is now managing travel vouchers, tracking dental appointments, updating mandatory online training certificates, and just generally making sure the young soldiers don't get into trouble.
So the soldiers are seen less as lethal assets and more as liabilities to be managed?
Administrative liabilities. That's the trap. When your main job goes from how do I train the soldier to be a lethal rifleman to how do I make sure this soldier's government travel card is up to date,
Yeah.
you've completely lost the plot.
And I can only imagine what that does to the initiative of both the NCO and the soldier. It must be crushing.
It's soul-crushing. Which brings us to this really critical concept in the paper, the authority gap. The source contrasts two very different kinds of authority an NCO can have.
Okay, let's break that down.
So on one hand, you have the authority from the recent COIN or counterinsurgency era. Think Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right?
In that environment, an NCO's authority was immediate. It was non-negotiable, and it was based on one thing.
Faith.
Faith. Your soldiers had faith that when your NCO told you to move or shoot or take cover, that split-second decision was going to keep you alive. The consequences for being wrong were real and they were fatal. So that authority was earned. It was forged in shared risk and proven competence under fire.
That's a powerful bond.
Yeah.
But then you take that same unit and you bring them back to a garrison environment in, say, Germany or the U.S.
Yeah.
The life or death pressure is gone.
It's gone. And the paper argues that in that garrison environment, the NCO's authority often degrades. It's no longer derived from faith. It's derived solely from the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ.
From the threat of punishment.
From the threat of punishment. The soldier obeys, not because they have deep trust in the NCO's tactical genius, but because they're afraid of getting an Article 15 or losing pay if they're insubordinate. It's a relationship based on compliance, not on competence.
But hold on, isn't that just discipline? I mean, the military runs on discipline. You have to have that fear of the UCMJ to maintain order, right? Is the paper saying we should get rid of that?
No, not at all. That's a great question. The source makes a really sharp distinction between discipline and motivation. Discipline is absolutely essential, but it's about the foundation of the team. Is the foundation trust or is it fear?
And if it's fear?
If the foundation of the team is just compliance and fear of punishment, the unit you build is what the source calls brittle.
Brittle. How so?
A brittle team can look perfect on inspection day. All the uniforms are pressed, all the paperwork is done, everyone stands at attention. It looks strong. But the moment you hit it with real, unexpected, high-level stress, the moment the enemy does something that isn't in the training manual, that fear-based structure just shatters.
People default to protecting themselves.
They default to self-preservation or bureaucratic safety. I'm not going to stick my neck out because I might get in trouble. They don't adapt. They freeze. The goal, the paper insists, is to build a force that isn't just strong, but anti-fragile.
And that's the concept where a system doesn't just survive stress, it actually gets stronger because of it. It learns from chaos.
Exactly. An anti-fragile team is built on that shared experience, on trust, on intrinsic motivation. They want to win, not because they're afraid of being punished, but because they have a deep-seated drive to protect each other and accomplish the mission. And you can only forge that kind of anti-fragile bond if the NCO has the freedom to design real, complex, challenging training that demands initiative, not just regulatory compliance.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis of the internal problem, this erosion of the NCO's authority. Now let's connect that to the people they're leading, because we have this weakened NCO, and you're asking them to lead the most technologically savvy generation of recruits in history.
The Call of Duty generation.
Right. And the source sees this as a huge, massive, untapped asset.
A giant asset that we are actively squandering. Think about it. The average high school graduate we recruit today is a digital native. They have grown up in immersive, complex, high-feedback digital environments.
Through games like Call of Duty or Battlefield.
Precisely. They already have a baseline tactical literacy before they even put on the uniform. They intuitively understand concepts like suppression, fire and maneuver, flanking, using UAVs for overhead intel. They can make rapid decisions in incredibly complex scenarios because they've done it thousands of times virtually.
They can process a huge amount of information from a 3D perspective and act on it almost instantly.
They are literally wired for speed and feedback. And this is where the paper just hammers on the strategic disconnect. We take these digital natives, these young people who thrive on rapid engagement and complexity, and we drop them into an environment that is overwhelmingly analog, process-heavy, and just painfully slow.
So we take their greatest strength and we basically tell them it's useless here.
We do worse than that. We strip away their autonomy. We trade that engaging complexity they crave for what they perceive as pointless bureaucracy. And the white paper is, it's scathing on this point. It says you cannot preach modernization while using training methods that literally bore soldiers to death.
That's a strong phrase.
It's meant to be. If the Army's default setting is to slow everything down to the pace of a checklist, you are systematically destroying the enthusiasm and the initiative of the very people who should be driving innovation from the bottom up.
I have to push on this a little, though. The Call of Duty idea. Isn't there a risk you're just catering to a need for entertainment? That this is about making training fun instead of instilling hard military discipline? How does the paper get a skeptical commander to buy into this?
It's a critical point, and the paper tackles it head-on by reframing the issue. It's not about the entertainment value of a game. It's about the feedback loop and the complexity. A young soldier isn't just looking for fun. They're looking for a challenge that rewards skill, adaptation, and quick thinking. The current analog checklist-driven system provides none of that. It's linear. It rewards compliance. They find it tedious not because it's not fun, but because it's not challenging in a meaningful way.
Right.
If we don't engage them with tactical problems that respect their intelligence, we lose them mentally. And that affects retention, morale, everything.
And this ties back to that strategic failure of identifying the wrong center of gravity.
Absolutely. A commander looks at their formation and thinks the center of gravity is the new Javelin missile, or the new drone, or the new encrypted radio.
The expensive stuff.
The expensive stuff. But the paper argues very forcefully that the center of gravity is definitively not the equipment. It is the cohesive bond of the team using the equipment.
So that drone is useless if the operator's too timid to fly it where it needs to go.
Exactly. A motivated, cohesive team, which is the direct product of an empowered NCO, can take older gear and make it sing. They can outthink and outmaneuver the enemy. Meanwhile, a fragmented, fearful, micromanaged team will fail to use even the most advanced equipment effectively. The tech is a multiplier for sure, but the NCO-led team cohesion, that's the force itself.
To make this failure really concrete, the paper uses the current qualification standard for marksmanship as its prime negative example. Paint a picture for us of what that looks like.
Okay, so imagine this. You're a soldier. You're going to the rifle range for your annual qualification. The process starts at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
You spend hours drawing weapons, drawing ammo, driving to the range, setting up targets, getting endless safety briefs.
A lot of waiting around.
A ton of waiting. Finally, hours later, it's your turn. You get 30 seconds to shoot at a stationary green-painted silhouette target that doesn't move and doesn't shoot back.
There's no tactical problem to solve.
Zero. The goal is not to win a fight. It's not to adapt to a changing situation. The goal is to hit the target enough times to get a passing score, so you can get promotion points, check a box on a readiness report for your commander, and finally go home for the day.
So the stress the soldier feels isn't tactical stress. It's not fear of the enemy.
It's administrative stress. The soldier is stressed about failing the test, about looking bad on paper, about not getting those promotion points. The motivation is entirely bureaucratic.
And the paper's point is that this has absolutely no bearing on what it takes to win a firefight on the eastern flank.
None. In fact, it's counterproductive. It reinforces the idea that the Army is a place of tedious compliance, not aggressive, adaptive warfighting. We are training soldiers to be good administrators of a weapon system, not lethal masters of their craft. And that, the paper argues, is a massive strategic vulnerability.
All right, so with that diagnosis, a brittle culture and ineffective training, the methodology has to propose a pretty radical solution.
It does. It calls for a complete pivot. The first step is to abandon what it calls the gold standard model of training.
And the gold standard model, that's these big, expensive, once-a-year training events. It's like a rotation to the National Training Center.
Exactly. Those events are incredibly valuable, but they're rare. They're high cost, high stakes, and you only get to do them maybe once every year or two. They provide a very steep learning curve, but it's very brief.
So what's the alternative?
The exact opposite. High repetition, low stakes, NCO-led competitive events, things you can do every single week. And the core philosophy behind this is maybe the most revolutionary thing in the whole paper for a big institution like the Army.
Which is?
Fun is a force multiplier.
I can just hear the traditionalists groaning at that. Fun has no place in a lethal organization.
I know, but the paper confronts that head on. It argues that fun is not a dirty word. It's actually the primary driver of skill acquisition and retention. Think about it. If training is boring and tedious, soldiers learn how to endure it. They check the box and forget the lesson.
But if it's engaging, competitive, and, yes, enjoyable.
They internalize it, they want to get better, they seek out the experience again, they practice on their own time, they are actively, intrinsically motivated to master the skill.
So this leads us to the actual operational proposal, what the paper calls the woods ball concept.
Yes, and I want to be really clear here for you listening. This is not a proposal for a morale day. This is not a company picnic with some laser tag thrown in. This is a structured, rigorous methodology for frequent force-on-force training.
Using cheap, off-the-shelf civilian tech.
Right. High-grade paintball markers, airsoft replicas, sophisticated laser tag systems. The key ingredients are frequency doing this all the time competition, and the most important piece of all, integration.
Okay, this is where I think you have to convince the skeptics, because it still sounds a lot like a game. How do you turn a paintball match into serious, lethal training? How do you integrate lethality?
You integrate lethality by designing the game so that victory is impossible without the aggressive and correct use of your actual issued combat equipment. This is what turns it from a game into a tactical laboratory.
Okay, walk us through a scenario. Lay it out.
All right, so you have a squad, 12 soldiers. They're playing a force-on-force paintball match in the woods against another squad from their platoon. There's real movement, real adrenaline. You get hit with a paintball, it stings, you're out. The stakes feel immediate.
Okay, basic paintball.
But the objective isn't just to shoot the other guys. The mission might be to locate an enemy command post and upload a virus from a ruggedized laptop. To do that, the squad has to coordinate a complex maneuver. And to do that, they must use their issued, secure SYN-CJR's radios, their ComSec.
And if they try to cheat and just use their cell phones to talk to each other?
They lose. Because the enemy squad has been given direction-finding equipment, their mission is to hunt for unencrypted electronic signals. The moment your guys use a cell phone, their position is compromised and they get wiped out.
I see. So failing to master the complex, official gear, mean you fail the mission. The game forces you to learn the hard stuff.
Exactly. It gets deeper. To avoid walking into the enemy's ambush, your squad has to use its organic micro-drone, the Black Hornet or whatever they're issued, to do reconnaissance of the objective.
And if they're clumsy with it and crash it into a tree?
They go blind, they lose their eyes in the sky, and they probably lose the match, and maybe the enemy squad is trying to jam their drone signal, so they have to learn how to counter that. In one single, low-cost, high-repetition game, your soldiers are getting real reps on secure comms, on their UAS platform, and on basic electronic warfare.
And the outcome, the paper says, is that they get hundreds of reps on this multi-million-dollar gear.
Hundreds. In a competitive, adrenaline-fueled environment. Compare that to the one or two sterile, boring rigs they might get at a formal training event once a quarter. The difference in learning and retention is just astronomical.
Let's talk about the psychological impact of that, the muscle memory.
It's everything. When you are physically running, breathing hard, trying not to get hit by a paintball, that physical stress, it's just enough to create a mild state of combat inoculation. It bypasses the purely cognitive brain and starts burning skills into your nervous system.
So keying the radio, launching the drone, reading the signals on the EW gear.
It stops being a conscious, step-by-step process you have to think about. It becomes automatic, it becomes muscle memory. You've done it so many times under stress that when the real moment comes, you just react correctly.
And this also changes how teams bond. The old model is bonding through shared suffering, the suck.
Right, and that works. Going through a miserable field exercise together definitely builds bonds. But the source makes a great point. The energy you can draw from misery has a ceiling. At some point, it just becomes burnout.
But bonding through shared victory.
Shared victory is limitless. When a squad pulls off a perfect flanking maneuver because their drone operator, their radio operator, and their rifleman all worked in perfect sync to win the match, the bond they form is positive, it's powerful, and it's built on a desire to repeat that success. They're not just enduring together, they are winning together.
What about resilience? Building that anti-fragile team that can handle things going wrong.
That's maybe the most elegant part of the gamified model. In the paintball scenario, if a soldier gets killed, they get hit with paint, they are out of the game, they have to go sit down.
So the team has to adapt immediately.
Instantly. They have to figure out how to function with a casualty, who picks up the machine gun, who takes over the radio. It forces cross-training. It forces junior soldiers to step up. A squad quickly learns that they can't just rely on their one drone expert. Everyone needs to have a basic understanding of everyone else's job because you never know who's going to go down.
And the NCO is at the center of all of this.
This is reclaiming the backbone in action. The NCO is no longer a babysitter or a PowerPoint clicker. They are a game designer, a coach, a tactical leader. They're designing the scenario, leading their soldiers to victory, and then leading the after-action review right after the match to figure out how to get better next week. Their expertise is valued, their leadership matters, they are back in their rightful place as the primary trainer of the unit.
It sounds like a perfect system. But we know it's not that simple. There has to be a reason this isn't already happening everywhere. And that brings us to the biggest obstacle of all.
The culture of risk aversion.
Right. None of this amazing training can happen if the leadership is too scared to let the soldiers actually use the expensive gear.
And that fear is what the paper calls the hand receipt chokehold. It's this central paralyzing fear that just strangles initiative at birth. The source uses the word terrified. It says, commanders and NCOs are literally terrified to let their soldiers use the new drones, the new radios, the new night vision goggles in any kind of dynamic, realistic way.
And the fear isn't of the enemy, it's of the paperwork. It's fear of the administrative consequences if something gets broken.
Exactly. You've got this brand new, state-of-the-art piece of equipment. It's supposed to be a weapon to make you more lethal. But because of the culture, it's not treated as a weapon. It's treated as an administrative liability. It stays locked in a Pelican case in the supply room, pristine and untouched, because if it gets a scratch on it, it could trigger an investigation that ends someone's career.
This is what the paper calls the grim calculus of risk aversion. And this is where the administrative fear has lethal consequences on the battlefield.
The grim calculus is a brutal trade-off. The cost of a broken radio is measurable. It's, say, $10,000. The Army can quantify that. But the cost of a lost battle of dead soldiers is unmeasurable. And the current culture punishes the measurable loss, the broken radio, far more severely than it even considers the unmeasurable one.
And the source connects this directly to what it calls a mass casualty or mass cal event. How does a fear of paperwork lead to mass casualties?
It's all about hesitation. The paper argues that the tiny moment of hesitation created by a command climate that fears investigation is enough to get your whole unit killed.
Walk me through that. How does that second of hesitation happen?
Okay, so you're a squad leader in a firefight. Your training has been dominated by a zero-defect, risk-averse mindset. You make contact with the enemy. The right answer is to immediately and aggressively maneuver and call for fire support. But in the back of your mind, there's this little voice.
The voice of the administrative crap.
The voice that says, if I dive into this ditch too fast, I might crack the screen on my radio, and then I'll face a 15-6 investigation and have to pay for it. So instead of instantly reacting, you hesitate. For maybe just 3, 4, 5 seconds, you try to move a little more carefully, you try to follow the exact protocol. And in modern warfare, those 5 seconds of hesitation are a lifetime. That's the window where the enemy launches the grenade or repositions the machine gun, and your squad gets wiped out.
A unit that's afraid to break a radio in training will be afraid to use it aggressively in a real fight.
That is the grim calculus. The fear of breaking the object outweighs the imperative to win the fight. It's a catastrophic failure of priorities.
And the main tool the system uses to enforce this culture of fear is something called a 15-6 investigation.
Yes, we should probably define that for listeners who aren't familiar. A 15-6 is a formal military investigation. It gets launched anytime a piece of sensitive or expensive equipment is lost or damaged.
And if that investigation finds you were negligent,
it can trigger what's called a FLEPL, a financial liability investigation of property loss. And a FLEPL can result in you, the soldier, or the NCO being personally billed for the cost of the equipment. We're talking thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars out of your own pocket. Or it could lead to a formal reprimand that kills your chances for promotion.
So the message is clear. Breaking things is very, very bad for your career and your wallet.
And the paper is adamant that launching a 15-6 or a fluff APL for legitimate training damage is the single fastest way to kill initiative in a unit.
Because it creates this effect of punished initiative.
Yes, the ripple effect is huge. An NCO tries something new, something aggressive, something that inherently carries a risk of failure and damage. They break a piece of gear, get investigated, and get punished. What's the lesson everyone else in the unit learns from that?
Don't stick your neck out. Don't try anything new. Play it safe.
Play it safe. Stagnation is safe. Initiative is dangerous. The smart career move becomes protecting the property book, not developing lethal warfighters.
And this doesn't just affect the people in that unit right now. The paper talks about a generational echo.
This is maybe the most insidious part. A young private, the future NCO, the future officer, sees their staff sergeant get hammered for an honest mistake in training. They see them get fined, get a bad report. They internalize that lesson deep down.
Risk is bad.
Risk will get you punished. And they carry that lesson with them for the next 20 years of their career. As they get promoted and move to other units, they spread that fear. The paper calls it a contagion of timidity. And if that contagion spreads across the entire force in Europe, then the whole deterrence mission is hollow. It's a house of cards.
Okay, so if the administrative trap is the disease, the cure has to be just as systematic. It can't just be a commander saying, hey, go take risks.
No, it has to be institutionalized. It needs to be written down in policy. This is what the source calls the imperative of top cover. Leaders, from the generals all the way down, have to provide genuine, rock-solid support. They have to create and enforce a culture where the response to training damage is reasonable, non-punitive, and focused on learning, not blame.
And to see what that actually looks like in practice, we can look directly at that example memorandum that goes along with the white paper. This is where it gets real.
It does. The memo starts with a new, aggressive command philosophy. It states, and this is a direct quote, "A command climate that prioritizes a pristine property book over a lethal squad is a strategic vulnerability."
That one sentence completely reorders the priorities.
It's a cannon shot. It tells every single person in the command, your ability to win the next fight is more important than the condition of the stuff on the supply room shelf. Full stop.
And the memo goes on to explicitly state that the fear of a flay PL is what creates that timid culture, the one that leads directly to mass casualties.
Right. And that's the setup for the key policy change, the creation of attritable assets.
Attritable. That's a key piece of military jargon. It basically means expected to be lost or damaged in action.
Exactly. The memo says that during these designated asymmetric training pilot events, the woods ball stuff, certain classes of equipment are officially considered attritable. We're talking Class 7 major items. So your radios, your drones, your night vision.
The commander is signing a piece of paper that says, I expect some of this stuff to break during training, and that is an acceptable cost.
That is the institutionalization of risk. The memo then creates a specific damage waiver. It says that damage that happens during legitimate tactical training, a drone crashing while you're trying to get a look over a hill, a radio getting cracked when you're diving for cover, will not automatically trigger a punitive investigation.
It's treated as a learning event, not a crime scene.
Yes, that is a massive, massive shift from the status quo, which often assumes you're guilty of negligence until you can prove yourself innocent. This policy removes the primary career and financial disincentive for an NCO to actually use their gear.
So what's the new standard? How does the top cover policy decide when an investigation is needed?
The standard is very clear. It says there will be no recommendation for pecuniary liability, no fines, unless the damage was the result of gross negligence.
And how does it define gross negligence?
Very, very narrowly. Gross negligence is defined as willful misconduct, intentionally smashing your gear, or being intoxicated while using it, or something similarly egregious. It is not dropping your rifle while running, or an honest mistake that leads to a drone crash. For all the normal wear, tear, and breakage that comes with hard, realistic training, the policy is no 15-6, no FLEPL.
The command is explicitly saying, we will not punish tactical aggression with administrative weapons.
That's the promise. But you might ask, doesn't this open the door for people to just lose stuff and say it broke in training?
Yeah, how do you prevent abuse?
The policy hinges on trust, the very thing it's trying to build. The only requirement is honest and immediate reporting. If you break something, you report it right away so it can be fixed or replaced to maintain readiness. The memo promises there will be no spotlight of shame. The bet is that an NCO's professionalism and the desire to win will be a stronger motivator than the temptation to lie, especially when the punishment for lying is so much worse than the punishment for an honest mistake, which is none.
So the memo ends with a direct charge to the leaders.
It does. It basically says, NCOs, take the gear out of the box. Train your soldiers. I have your back. And that's the top cover that makes everything else possible.
So with that top cover in place, how do you scale this? How do you build an entire ecosystem around this idea to create a real asymmetric advantage?
The first step is to get away from our obsession with exclusionary competitions.
Things like Best Ranger or Soldier of the Year.
Exactly. Those competitions are great for morale and for recognizing excellence, but they only train the top 1%. They don't raise the competency of the entire force. They don't make the average squad on the eastern flank any more lethal.
So you need a different model,
The paper calls for a Chiefs versus 49ers mentality.
like the Super Bowl.
Huh.
What does that mean in this context?
It means the entire formation competes. Every squad, every platoon. It's not about finding the one best soldier. It's about raising the baseline skill level of everyone. The competition should be frequent, mandatory, and accessible so the entire organization becomes anti-fragile, not just a handful of elite individuals.
And this kind of massive cultural shift has to start somewhere specific. The sources point to the 7th Army Training Command, 7ATC, and the 173rd Airborne Brigade as the ideal test beds.
Yes, and there's a good reason for that. 7ATC is the main training engine for the entire U.S. Army in Europe. They run the big training areas in Germany. They're the natural hub for reform like this.
And the 173rd?
They're a forward-deployed airborne unit. Their entire existence is predicated on being in a high state of readiness to respond to a crisis on the eastern flank. They already have a high training tempo, which makes them the perfect laboratory to experiment with this fusion of military gear and commercial tech in a really demanding environment.
And this whole approach is a rejection of the slow, methodical way the Army usually develops doctrine.
A complete rejection. The paper uses this great analogy, the cathedral versus the bazaar.
Okay, explain that.
The cathedral is the old way. It's a single, monolithic program of instruction, built slowly and carefully by a handful of experts at a doctrine center in the Pentagon. It's beautiful, it's deliberate, but it takes years to build or change.
Too slow for the modern battlefield.
Way too slow. An adversary can go through 5 generations of drone tactics in the time it takes the cathedral to publish one update.
So the solution is the bazaar.
The bazaar is the goal. It's messy, it's loud, it's decentralized. It's thousands of NCOs all trying different things at once, sharing what works, discarding what doesn't. It's a system of rapid bottom-up iteration that evolves faster than doctrine can even be written.
It creates this constant feedback loop.
A feedback loop that operates at the speed of the squad, not the speed of the Pentagon. A sergeant can see a tactical problem in a paintball match on a Tuesday, use a 3D printer to create a solution for it on a Wednesday, and test it in the field on Friday. That's the kind of speed you need to win.
But let's get down to brass tacks here. The financial reality. This all sounds great, but it's not free.
It's not. And the paper argues the Army needs a fundamental shift in how it views training resources. We have no problem spending $1 million on fuel and artillery for a big 2-week training exercise. We have to be just as willing to fund all the small, high-frequency events that happen in between those big ones.
And that means changing how we think about consumables.
A massive change. Things like paintballs, CO2 canisters, batteries for the radios, and drones. Right now, those are often seen as nice-to-have items that get cut when the budget is tight.
They're treated like office supplies.
Exactly. The paper and the memo are explicit. They must be treated with the same logistical priority as ammunition. They are, and this is another direct quote, bullets, not toys. They are mission-essential items required to build readiness.
So a squad leader putting in a request for 50,000 paintballs should be seen the same as a request for 5.56 millimeter rounds.
That's the goal. The training budget has to reflect that high-repetition training is the priority. Which brings us back to the final, most important point, attritability. We have to accept financially and culturally that breaking gear is a necessary cost of doing business. It's the price you pay for developing a warfighter who is trained to win, not a technician who is trained to preserve a property book.
That feels like the perfect summary of the entire argument. We've covered a lot of ground here, from cultural psychology to logistical policy.
We have. And it all comes together in this final charge. The sources argue that our real asymmetric advantage isn't going to come from having a slightly better drone than the enemy. It's going to come from combining the raw, inherent tech savviness of our young recruits with the unlocked leadership potential of our NCOs.
And by creating a culture that accepts risk, embraces competition, and trusts its people, you build something that an adversary with a top-down rigid system just can't compete with.
You create a living web of lethality, a system that learns and adapts faster than any central command ever could.
And that's really the core message we want to leave you with today. This is about empowering NCOs to get the gear out of the box, to take calculated risks, and to make training challenging and engaging again. It's about moving beyond the sterile world of shooting green targets for promotion points and starting to train for the only thing that actually matters: winning.
And to leave you with one last thought to chew on, we've spent this time talking about how the military needs to prioritize initiative and acceptable risk over administrative perfection. But think about how that same grim calculus might apply in your own life, in your own organization.
In a non-military context.
Exactly. In any big bureaucracy, a corporation, a hospital, a university, what is the equivalent of the mass casualty scenario in your world? What's the catastrophic failure that happens because good people are too afraid of an investigation or of getting fired or just of looking bad on a report to take the necessary risk? That fear of the administrative cost is often the hidden killer of innovation and effectiveness in any large system. It's the force that values looking perfect over being effective.
A provocative thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.